Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wow.
Good morning, everyone. So we are from group 13. Before that, thank you for attending our sociolinguistic class today. So we are gonna presentate about attitudes to the language and the application of sociolinguistic in education. Our group consists of Billy Bimantoro, Eris Nidara, and me, Gina Safira. So let's start from the first material. Next slide. The first is about attitudes to the language. So language attitudes can have a great influence in areas such as education. Arguments in Somalia about which script should be used to write Somali Cushitic language delay progress in increasing literacy rates for decades. The most influential factors in this debate were not the intrinsic merits of the alternative scripts, but rather people's attitudes to speakers and writers of Arabic and English and the functions of which those languages were used. Supporters of Arabic script pointed to the prestige, the religious significance, and the cultural importance of Arabic for the people of Somalia. So this is the examples of attitude to the language. According to Holmes, 2017, it has been suggested that intelligibility is also affected by attitudes. People generally find it easier to understand languages and dialects spoken by people they like or admire. A closely related point, at least for majority group members, is that people are more highly motivated and consequently often more successful in acquiring a second language when they feel positive toward those who use it. Move to the next slide, please. So the next is about overt and covert press type. Before we discuss about the covert, let me explain about the overt press type. The meaning of overt press type is reasonably confident, self-evident. The standard variety in a community has overt press type. Speakers who use the standard variety are rated highly on scales of educational and occupational status. Their speech indices their high social status. These positive ratings indicate the associations of their speech variety, which is generally held up as the best way of speaking in the community. So the cover press type, by contrast, is an odd term which could even be regarded as involving two contradictory ideas. How can something have a press type if its value is not publicly recognized? The term cover press type has been widely used, however, to refer to positive attitudes towards vernacular or non-standard speech varieties. Clearly, such varieties are valued or they will not continue to be used. Yet, when people are asked to comment on them, they rarely admit to valuing them, or at least to strangers. Next slide, please. So the next is attitudes to standard English and received pronunciation, or RP. Standard English has an enormous legacy of overt prestige. It has been regarded as a symbol of British nationhood. For well, for well over a century, it has been promoted as the only acceptable variety for use in all official domains, including education. By comparison, vernacular dialects of English are downgraded. And RP, or received pronunciation, is rated ahead of all other accents on such as criteria as communicative effectiveness, social status, and general pleasantness. People who use RP accents are often taken more seriously, and RP speakers are more likely to persuade people to cooperate. So the next material will be presented by Eris Nindara. Eris, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Gina. Next slide, please. And the second is, and my material is about attitudes to vernacular forms of English. The first is African American vernacular English. Most non-linguists, however, are unaware of the evidence for EAVE as a distinct and systematic variety. Consequently, criticism of AAVT has been well documented by sociolinguists for decades. So, mass media use tend to confirm these negative attitudes to AAVE. African American new readers and movie stars typically use SAE, while those entertainers and sports celebrities who do use AAVE features tend to restrict them to more intelligible stereotypical features in less formal contexts. And the next is vernacular forms of English, users, and context. Standard English is the English used by educated people with relatively high social status. So middle class children speak Standard English and children from other social media groups do not. When people talk of non-standard English, they are referring to the fact that particular linguistic forms occur more often in the speech of one group than another. Next slide, please. And the next is a note on methodology. The first is social treatment. Uh, Sociolinguistics can interpret it by observing the way language is used in the public domain. So this is a very unobtrusive method of collecting data, and a wide variety of materials can be used for this purpose. And the second is direct measures. Sociolinguistics can ask direct questions about people attitudes to particular language or language varieties or even language features. Like example is, do you like the Welsh language, or do you think Welsh sounds beautiful? Do you like the sound at the beginning of the Welsh word, landudo, and etc. And the last is indirect measures. A third way of collecting data on language attitude is to use an indirect measure which elicits the respondents' attitudes without making them feel self-conscious or embarrassed. The next, please. Uh, the next is the application of sociolinguistics in education. Uh, you can read in the PPT that sociolinguistic innovation can be implemented in a variety of educational settings, including systemic education management, educational process management, educational program context, and information technology of application. So, the next material is delivered by Billy.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum wabarakatuh. Today we are going to learn about vernacular dialects and educational disadvantage. Many sociolinguists have been drawn into public debates about the educational implication of their research. The best known example is probably the part sociolinguistics have played in debates over the place of vernacular dialects in schools, and the claims that children who use vernacular forms are linguistically deprived or deficient. And then this is an area where some sociolinguists have made great efforts to be helpful. Some have developed programs to change teachers' negative attitudes and develop their appreciation of linguistic diversity. Others have interpreted the result of sociolinguistic research for teachers and provided advice and recommendation for classroom practice. Slide. Linguistic def- deficit. Educational testing is a related area where sociolinguistic research has proven useful. Sociolinguistics, sociolinguists have successfully demonstrated that claims that children from minority groups and working class families were linguistically disadvantaged were generally based on insufficient tests. Sociolinguists have made a significant contribution to this field by providing evidence about the impact of contextual factors on speech. This point will be illustrated with an example. It is common to ask children to complete a number of language tests in order to determine the extent of their vocabulary and grammar. These tests were once frequently administered by an adult stranger from a different social background than the child and occasionally from the different ethnic group. Okay, that's enough presentation from me. For the conclusion, we will read it. You know. Tina, for the conclusion, we will read it.
Oh, okay. So let me conclude our discussion today. The linguistic varieties of different groups and their sociolinguistic rules or appropriate ways of speaking in different contexts may be quite distinctive. Sociolinguistic information on the social basis of attitudes to these varieties and their uses helps explain why children from lower socioeconomic groups and children from minority cultural backgrounds often do not succeed in middle class classrooms. Sociolinguists have long been interested in how language play a role in education. Second language learning is another area where sociolinguistic information on pattern of another of language use and attitudes to language has proved valuable. Sociolinguistic information can usefully illuminate many everyday interactions in a speech community. So I think that's all from our presentation. If you guys have any question, you can write down on our website group. So thank you for your great attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very
Waalaikumsalam.
much, guys.